Acolytes. Squampopulus. I think I nailed it this time. Made actually interesting video again because no, I didn't see it. But hey, this guy only makes interesting videos, especially this one. When the villain is just too smart to lose. This happens far more often than you think. And then convenience
Love to watch
just lets the hero win. So, let's just see what he has to say about it.
It's no secret that we love to watch a good villain.
Hell
Which
yeah.
means writers have to make them strong. But sometimes writers make them too strong for a hero to defeat. So what happens to a hero when the villain simply can't be overcome?
Luck. Basically just plot armor, everything that, well, per sheer brutal luck protects the hero. Most of the time.
Well, the answer is simple. They have to lose.
They don't have to lose, but let's hear what he has to say.
If you've watched any of my recent videos on antagonists, you probably know the drill by now. And I mean that quite literally. I'm talking about my antagonist drill,
Hell
a
yeah.
framework that I completely made up. Within it are 3 types of antagonists: obstacles, dilemmas, and mirrors. What the drill does is help make villains that make good stories. I'm talking big picture. It helps create meaningful challenges for the protagonist. The lower you go down the framework, the harder it is for the protagonist to defeat the antagonist. My previous video talked specifically about the obstacle layer, but when the hero's abilities aren't
Good
enough
video,
to
by the
win,
way.
we move on to the dilemma layer. A dilemma antagonist forces the protagonist to choose between 2 unfavorable outcomes. In other words, they refine the protagonist's values. The thing is, in order to force a protagonist to do anything, the villain has to be more powerful than them.
Yes.
Therefore, in today's video, we have some of the most competent villains in recent...
I mean more powerful, not necessarily maybe smarter, maybe more mischievous, or just being willing to abuse the weak points of the good guy. So, not necessarily more powerful. It just depends on the villain, to be quite honest.
media, a lot of whom win in some capacity. But I have to let you know now that they won't necessarily get their evil ever after. When I say these villains win, it's about the ones that get the heroes to lose. So to understand how this is achieved, I first want to lay out my rules about writing these antagonists. I have 3 tests that a dilemma antagonist has to pass in order to get my stamp of approval. The first of which is the cake test. Can the protagonist have their cake and eat it too? They better not, or else it's not a dilemma. They need to make an exclusive choice, one way or the other, no in between. The next test is the trolley problem. Do their options form a lose-lose situation that doesn't have a clear answer? If one choice obviously outweighs the other, then the dilemma fails. Only when the best choice isn't clear do we get a deeper look into the character, which plays into the final test. Character development. Does the choice reveal anything new about the protagonist? This is the whole point of forcing them to choose. We, the audience, want to see what they value most and just how much they value it.
If
you
enough.
Know what they value, then applying a dilemma antagonist is pointless.
I just don't know why he called it the butterfly effect, to be quite honest. It doesn't make sense to me, but I just don't know enough about filmmaking to actually realize why.
The audience new things is like the whole point of storytelling. We either want to see characters change, see how relationships change, or have our own understandings change.
Yes,
a well-written dilemma antagonist will always achieve this. Without further ado, let's pick out some of the villains that win and see how they hold up to these rules. When I first came up with this framework, I was scrambling to find examples that align.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. That's a good framework. Yeah. Fair enough.
With a theory. On paper, it makes a lot of sense to me, but besides the Joker from The Dark Knight, who's the most celebrated villain in YouTube essay history, I struggled to find antagonists that further supported the dilemma layer. So thank God I watched Gone Girl. Amy Dunn, the girl who was gone, is a perfect example of a dilemma antagonist, and it makes for a pretty unforgettable narrative. She's incredibly competent, ruthlessly committed to her goals, and an antagonist that her...
Okay, Acolytes, if by some chance anybody who knows this film could tell me if this is something good, I would appreciate it.
husband Nick just simply can't beat. Let's break down how she adheres to all of my requirements and what it means for the story and its characters. When Amy finds out that Nick was cheating on her, she sets up a master plan to fake her own murder and get him the death penalty. Yes, she is that crazy, but she's smart too, which makes her that much more of a threat.
Yeah.
While Nick slowly unravels the truth, the public becomes more and more convinced that he killed her. As fake evidence piles up against him, he realizes that his fate lies in the public's perception of him. This forces the first dilemma Nick encounters. Option A is to face the music, admit his wrongdoings, and tell the world that he's a shitty husband. Option B is to let the case run its course and gamble his life against the evidence Amy set up. Let's run it through the checklist. First, the cake test. Can he save face and still survive? Looking at the rate the case is going, absolutely not. More evidence piles against him by the day. He has to choose one or the other. Next, the trolley problem. Are his two options similar in weight? Is there no clear answer? Frankly, I think anyone can agree that there's an obvious answer. Option B is basically dying, so option A is the clear choice.
Yes.
Meaning it failed the second test. But it does pass the final rule. This dilemma definitely makes Nick's character change. He admits to his wrongdoing. So the first dilemma is honestly more of a forced acceptance, which is actually in line with the mirror antagonist. But there's a choice he has to make soon to come that I think definitely makes this story one of a dilemma. When Amy sees Nick's public apology, she practically gets everything she wanted. But she knows that Nick was lying, and things can't magically go back to the way they were. So she has to pin him once again. She needs to force another dilemma. Nick can't simply divorce her because it would make him look like a monster to the world. So he's stuck in his fake marriage to a literal psychopath. This could be solved if he were to tell the world the truth, but Amy traps him with the ultimate trump card. She reveals that she's pregnant with his child.
Ooh. Yeah, the trap card was activated, Acolyte.
Herein lies the final dilemma. Option A is to abandon his unborn child and force them to be raised by a psychopath. Option B is to live as a family built on manipulation, lies, and a very real murder. So, how does it hold up to my rules? Firstly, Nick can't have his cake and eat it too. He can't live with his child but without Amy, because there's no way he would ever get custody. There's too much foggy evidence, too much love for Amy, and no worldly chance. Next, the trolley. No obvious choice. I'd say this passes with flying colors. Living with Amy after learning just how crazy she is sounds like a nightmare, but leaving your own child in her hands is just as bad. Whatever choice Nick makes is certainly going to come with a devastating cost. Finally, does this further develop the protagonist Nick Dunn? Remember, this is the key, and it's why a dilemma antagonist should even exist. The answer is it absolutely does. Nick chooses to live with Amy, showing to the audience just how much he values being a responsible father. For him to go through this entire journey and still choose to live with her shows just how much he cares about this kid. And what many people also believe it reveals is that there's a part of him deep down that actually likes Amy's craziness. How's that for character development? We don't get that kind of look into Nick Dunn without an antagonist.
Okay, two sickos meeting each other. I mean, okay, fair enough.
That forces him to choose. Thanks to Amy Dunn's brilliant dilemmas, we got a fascinating look into the characters as well as marriage as a whole. Textbook dilemma antagonist.
Well, okay. Damn.
In my original antagonist video, I hinted at the idea that I don't like Thanos as a villain, but I wanted to wait until the dilemma video to fully explain why. So here we are.
Yes,
this time
nice.
I unravel my beef with Marvel's Purple Madman. Thanos is far and away Marvel's most memorable villain, and it's no wonder why. Simply put, he was just better.
I mean,
in Infinity
makes
War,
sense.
he did something that no villain had ever done in a Marvel movie before. He won. He was just too powerful for the heroes. His plan was
basically they fixed it afterwards, but he actually got what he wanted.
His strength was too overwhelming, and the hero's abilities were simply not enough. They had all gone through their own movies at that point and were basically at their strongest, but they still came up short. Thanos was better. His competency is why so many people love him, and it's what graduated him from an obstacle to a dilemma. He couldn't be overcome. However, this new categorization of him made me want more from him, and in Endgame, we didn't get it. So as a dilemma antagonist, rather than covering his motives and his backstory and yada yada, I'm just here to isolate the dilemma he presented to the heroes. He kicked their asses in Infinity War, which meant that in order to win, they were going to have to pay a price this time. So what are their options? Option A is to move on, accept that Thanos won, and just live out the rest of their lives.
Well, yes.
Option B is to challenge Thanos again, knowing that it's going to cost some of their lives. Let's put this dilemma to my tests. First, the cake test. Can they have their cake and eat it too? aka can they keep their lives and also beat Thanos? The answer is a resounding no, he's just too strong, which means this dilemma passes the cake rule. This is why everyone loves him. He forces a tough decision. But for me, it's only 1/3 of what I'm looking for. Sorry, but Squampopulous is a harsh grader. Next, let's map it over the trolley problem.
I don't know why. It's
Of what I'm looking for. Sorry, but Squampopulous is a harsh grader. Next,
why is this so far? Okay, no, this silly face plus the words is a harsh. No.
let's map it over the trolley problem. Is there no clear answer? Well, on one hand, the protagonists can choose their own lives. I think we can all agree that it's a pretty desirable choice. I like being alive, and I'm sure Iron Man does too.
Yes.
But on the other track are the lives of, an unquantifiable number of living beings. Literally half of infinite lives, which is still infinite, by the way. So are these two choices even? Probably not, but it's easy for me to say because I'm not on the tracks.
Correctly,
Honestly,
yes.
I'll give this a pass because the ultimate price is called the ultimate price for a reason. The
Yes.
characters sacrificing themselves is certainly a dilemma, which means there's one last test to pass. The character development tests. Does the choice they make tell us something new about them? And there's the kicker. If you think Thanos was a good antagonist, I have one question that I think shuts this down. How many times have we seen Tony Stark sacrifice himself? The answer is at least several. We kinda already knew his values. So what good does it do to show us for like the 5th time that he's willing to give his life for humanity? What I'm trying to get at is, narratively speaking, Thanos was just redundant. Sure, he hit a lot harder, but at the end of the day, he told us nothing new. And for this reason, he failed. I should instead say he fell short. There is a lot to commend him on. He was essential in wrapping up a decade-long story that captivated hundreds of millions of people. But let's face it, he could have been better. Endgame was honestly super forgettable, and I think this is why. It told us nothing
fair enough.
new. Before you comment that I'm asking too much from a comic book movie, to that I say ratio. There's no reason that they can't combine the whimsy of superheroes with the tried and true storytelling that goes deeper than good guy wins.
Just uplift your standards, acolytes, or the guy. The question that he just asked. You deserve more. You deserve something good. Everybody of us does. Do not settle for shit. Except you find it funny. I mean, poking the shit is sometimes a bit funny, acolyte, so there's that, but not always.
Don't get me wrong. I love when the good guy wins. Just not when that's all the movie has to say. Next up is a beloved villain that completely steals the show, displaying extreme competency and instilling both terror and whimsy into every scene he's in.
One of the best
Hans
villains, by
Landa.
the way.
And believe it or not, I think I have a suggestion that would have made Inglourious Bastards just a touch better. From the very first scene, we immediately come to learn that the Jew hunter Hans Landa is incredibly good at his job. Like, borderline supernaturally good.
Yep.
He knows everything. What's so unique about him
He does.
though, is his cheery...
Yeah, and it's so well done. It is this guy.
That contrasts so well with the evil he carries out. But that's enough hyping him up. I won't give any more glaze than I did the previous villains. We're here for the dilemmas. Inglourious Bastards sort of juggles two protagonists, whose separate stories only converge in the final act. The first I'll cover is Shoshana Dreyfus. In the first scene, Landa orders the execution of her entire family, and she narrowly escapes with her life. Later on, once she's acquired her own cinema, the Nazi party actually decides to host a watch party in her very theater. Over a lunch in which they brief her, Landa appears and subtly reveals to her that he knows her
It was a bit effed up, to be honest.
identity as the Jewish girl that got away. This is what leads to the first dilemma. Shoshana could either A, do nothing, letting the Nazis use her cinema and run the risk that Landa arrests her, or B, take them all down, including herself. So let's test this out. I think it totally passes the cake rule. She can't choose to do nothing while simultaneously taking down the Nazis. While she could put all her faith in the Allies, this didn't guarantee that Landa wouldn't arrest her before the war ended. She had to act one way or another. Next, the trolley problem. On one track is her life.
Yep.
If she's going to take the Nazis down, she would be doing so in a way that would bring her down with them. However, it does guarantee that her enemies would be destroyed and the war would be finished. On the other track is also her life. If she were to remain complacent, this could very well lead to her demise if the Nazis were to remain in power. However, the appeal to this track is the slight possibility that she may in fact survive. So I think it's safe to say that the two tracks are fairly equal. There isn't an
More or
obvious
less,
answer,
yes.
but she has to choose. And finally, the third test. Does the choice develop her character? 100%. Shoshana and her lover choose to give their lives up in order to take down the Nazis. In turn, this informs us a ton about their values, and gives us a harrowing look into the horrors that war and oppression create. Is this all thanks to Hans Landa? Not entirely, but I think it was his actions and threats that ultimately pushed Shoshana to make the choice she did.
Yes.
Now, what about the other protagonist, Aldo Rain? As the leader of the Inglourious Bastards themselves, Rain is the main protagonist of the movie.
Yep.
Much like Hans Landa, the Inglourious Bastards strike fear into the hearts of their enemies and totally dominate every scene there.
By the way, acolytes, I just want to say it right now. Watch this film if you can. It's beautifully done.
So, what happens when their paths finally cross with Landa and the Nazi leaders? On the same night as Shoshana's big plan, they too have come to the same conclusion as her. They are prepared to sacrifice their own lives in order to end the war. But things pan out a little differently for them when Landa intervenes in their plans. Like the all-knowing force he is, Landa pulls them aside to make a deal. He presents them a dilemma. Option A is to take his deal, allowing their plan to pan out, winning the war, but it means Landa gets to walk away a free man and a war hero. Option B is to reject his deal, stunting their plan and gambling the results of the war on the Allies.
Yeah, and the thing... No, this would be a spoiler. I don't know if he spoils it, but I won't. The ending of this is just on effing... I love the ending of this.
Won't bother putting this through the test because Aldo admits it's a complete no-brainer. Winning the war is the obvious choice. But it does mean that Hans Landa will get to walk away scot-free. This is where the real dilemma lies, and it's where I think Inglourious Bastards could have benefited from a slight change. Once the war is over, Landa surrendered himself, enabling the transaction to take place. However, this is where Aldo faces the real dilemma. Option A is to let the deal pass, comply with his superior's commands, and let Landa walk away with a happily ever after.
Yep.
Option B is to disobey his commands and take Landa's fate into his own hands. So, how does it hold up against the tests? Well, at the heart of the cake rule is the lack of a middle ground. Either let the deal pass or punish Landa, no in between. And what we see Aldo do is basically an in between. He lets Landa live, but carves the swastika into his forehead, his signature move. While this is a satisfying callback, I have some issues with this choice. So it does reveal to us a very specific understanding.
I understand that he has an issue with it, but I loved this ending. This was so, in my opinion, so satisfying. How they just bamboozled a villain to this degree was, I loved it.
Of Aldo's values. He respects his commands enough to not kill Landa, but not enough to let him walk away freely.
Yes.
Which, to me, seemed a little out of character. Rain's hatred for Nazis was the core of his motivation throughout the entire movie. But with this last scene, it implies that as much as he loves killing Nazis, he values chain of command even more. If it were up to me, I would have probably had Rain face a serious consequence for his choice. All that's implied is that he gets chewed out. So with the trolley test, it doesn't really pass either. On one track, he lets his mortal enemy walk away free. On the other track, he gets yelled at. Those are completely incomparable in weight. The lack of stakes makes his choice obvious. One of the most prevalent themes in Inglourious Bastards is the lose-lose situation. It happens in the bar scene, and it happens in the cinema. But it doesn't happen for Aldo Rain. If there were a true loss he had to face at the cost of carving Landa, I think it would have been much more impactful for his character and much more fitting for the story. So that's my gripe with Inglourious Bastards. I think a little tweak would have gone a long way, and I'm curious if you guys agree.
I'm gonna say this. Yes, I agree with him. Yes, it would probably have been better. Yes, at the end of the day, if they did it a bit differently, it would probably do better. But at the end of the day, it was so freaking satisfying that I just don't care.
For the final example, I want to highlight an antagonist that, I'll be honest with you, doesn't win at all. But he does use his power to force an impossibly difficult decision onto the protagonist, and for that reason, he totally fits the bill for a dilemma antagonist. The man is Captain Ramsey from Crimson Tide, an intense thriller about a nuke-carrying submarine during the Cold War. I'm sure you can already guess how dilemma is baked into the very core of this story. The two men in charge of the submarine, and therefore the nuclear missile, are the antagonist Captain Ramsey and the protagonist Lieutenant Commander Ron Hunter. From their early interactions, we can pick up that the two stand on opposite philosophies. Ramsey is all about initiative and doing what needs to get done. Hunter is more about pragmatism and preserving the greater good at all costs.
Yeah.
The question is, just how much does Hunter adhere to these values? If you've learned anything from this video, it's that a surefire way to test a character's values is to present them with a dilemma. And Captain Ramsey does just that. Naturally, in a thriller about launching nukes, the sub gets an order from the higher-ups to launch a nuke. Following procedure, the two men both agree to authorize the launch. That is, until a second message is received. The problem is, it's blank. It could mean anything. This is what sparks the great dilemma. Ramsey sees this and pays no mind. He's dead set on launching the missile, which gives Hunter two choices. Option A is to go against his judgment and proceed with the launch. This ensures that if Russia's about to launch their nukes, America will get the first jab in. Option B is to go against his peers and his higher-ups and jeopardize millions of American lives, all in the name of sticking to his personal values. For one last time this video, let's run it through the tests. First, the cake test. Can Hunter maintain his philosophy and fire the missile, knowing there's a chance the launch was called off? No. These two choices are in direct conflict with each other. As long as there's a sliver of doubt, his values don't align with launching that nuke. So it passes. Next, the trolley problem. On one track are the lives of millions of Americans who will die if Russia gets their nuke off. Not to mention Hunter would probably get arrested if there are even prisons left. On the other track is Ron's entire philosophy, representing the potential billions of lives that a nuclear holocaust would take. Now, it's easy to compare millions to billions and say the two choices aren't even, but I wouldn't say this makes the choice obvious. This is basically an exact replica of the original trolley problem, and it's famous for a reason. It's not an easy choice to make. Another pass. Lastly, the character development test. I think it's easy for anyone to sit there and say that they value doing the right thing and preserving humanity at all costs. It's a lot harder to put your money where your mouth is, especially with so much on the line. So when Hunter's faced with an opportunity to gamble everything on his values, he steps up to the plate and he does it. And it makes for a fantastic story.
Yes.
Before I watched this movie, I had no idea who Captain Ramsey was. He doesn't get mentioned in any list of the top antagonists. But with the dilemma that he presented, it ultimately made for a super powerful story and a message that I think everyone should hear.
Okay,
so,
fair
sorry
enough.
For spoiling it, but seriously, go watch Crimson Tide. It's great. Admittedly, this video was pretty difficult to make. I definitely believe in my framework, but finding examples that back it up was pretty challenging. I think this is because many antagonists simply get overcome by the protagonist, which is a telltale sign of an obstacle. But I expect there's plenty of villains you have in mind who did win that I didn't get to in this video. That might be because they do something that goes beyond what a dilemma antagonist achieves. Maybe these antagonists are mirrors, and I'm saving them for my next video. So not only do I hope you subscribe so you don't miss it, but I'll also ask that you leave a comment on any antagonist that you think fits the category.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Acolytes, the man, again, impressed me. A lot of things to think about. Again, this horseman just does it time and time again. Show him and me some love. And, as it is, Acolytes, good night.